So, may we start?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies recorded in the late afterwork hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Madeline.
I'm Julian.
And I'm Emilio. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Seriously, we would love to hear from you. And you can also follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok for updates, highlights, clips, and other visual supplements to the audio we record at the handle Sleepless Cinematic Pod.
In addition to these main episodes, we record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit. And while we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we continue our current cycle where we discuss Offbeat Musicals with a suggestion box episode. This is where one of us, or two of us, elects a film for the group to discuss. At least one of us will be seeing this movie for the first time, and differing opinions may or may not be held among us.
And this film that we're discussing, it is a true joint suggestion on the part of myself and Madeline. We are talking about Annette, which was released in 2021. It was directed by Carax, and it was written and composed by the brothers Ron and Russell Mael, better known to their many, many fans as the pop duo Sparks.
Yes, and this episode is an absolute treat for me because our guest is a friend of mine for, I counted, 20 years. Photographic evidence.
Whoa!
Photographic evidence.
Oh my gosh! Oh, that's so sweet. Oh my God.
He is an actor, singer, dancer, and particularly applicable to this episode, an incredible puppeteer.
Ah, shucks.
Kelly and I grew up doing community theater together. We kicked off this cycle discussing Little Shop of Horrors, and Kelly here was actually our Seymour and the production that I referenced often in that particular episode. Now a seasoned and multi-talented performer, Kelly can be seen in New York City and beyond, sometimes front and center, and sometimes with a trusty puppet by his side. Please welcome Kelly Autry.
Hey.
Welcome.
Yay.
Thank you all for having me so much. I super appreciate it. I'm glad to be here talking about this
Weird
wacko movie.
But
sure.
I think ripe for discussion.
Mm.
I
Yes.
feel very firmly about.
This is very much a movie that inspires conversation. I think
Sure.
that was a big goal of the film.
Yeah, and we've been having conversations about movies in a routine way for going on 3 years now. And so we're in the perfect platform to discuss Annette. But before we get all the way in to discussing this movie, there are a few titles that maybe sound a little similar that you don't want to confuse this with. And as a film, maybe, the character Annette is too small to be called a young woman, but as someone who has many experiences at the whims of a toxic male counterpart, throughout a cascade of events, and also on account of the beginning of this title, Annette is not to be confused with Honora.
Okay, I was like, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
And I have to give credit for this not to be confused to a 2-time guest on the podcast, my personal friend, Lily Desmond, who we hung out about a week after Honora had its big night at the Oscars, and they mistakenly referred to Honora as Annette.
Okay.
And I said at the time, like, oh, you just gave me some ideas here.
Yeah.
And now here I am making good on
Earmark
that.
that one
Yeah.
for 2 years later.
Well, it's more like a year and a half, but still.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I would also say Annette is not to be confused with The Net, which is the 1995 Sandra Bullock-led thriller about a computer programmer who stumbles onto a government conspiracy and starts to get chased down by shadowy government operatives who look to silence her. Has anybody seen this movie?
No, I've never even
say
heard
that
of
I
this.
have, but this is definitely not this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely not this movie. I really want to see this movie again because it is so specifically about what the internet was like in the mid-90s. I was like curious if anybody happened to see this more recently and could bring their understanding of what the internet is now to what the internet was then. Not the same movie though, as you said.
Swordfish.
Kelly.
It's always swordfish.
Yeah.
And Annette is also not to be confused with Nanette, which is comedian Hannah Gadsby's comedy special from 2018, which is very much an kind of comedy special because it really blew up in 2018. Like, I think it was everywhere. A lot of people were watching it, and I have not thought about it in 8 years. But Nanette, not to be confused with Annette.
Yeah.
It's also not to be confused with another, I know it might be similar, another tragicomic musical about an unraveling marriage, No, Nanette.
Oh, yeah.
No, Nanette, the 1940 American film based off a musical.
I like this. Very cool.
Yeah.
Nanette, no, Nanette.
No, Nanette.
No. Yes, Annette, please.
Yes. I think you can say no to a lot of other people in this particular movie. No, Henry McHenry.
Yeah.
And well, speaking of people, the fact that you can say no to a character like Henry McHenry. So Annette is a film that shows more than one side, but mostly one side of, and let's call it a non-ideal parenting situation. And
non-ideal.
I think
certainly
that's
one way to put it.
Generous, yeah.
And thinking of another recent film that also shows kind of the other side of a non-ideal parenting situation, Annette is not to be confused with Hamnet.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and you know what Dougie said? Dougie is what we call my partner on this podcast. He said that he would have liked Hamnet a lot more if Hamnet, the child, was played by
puppet?
Annette. Because that was his major thing with Hamnet. He was like, I don't like this precocious child. And I was like, I don't know if that's fair. I think this kid's doing fine. But
Interesting.
he would have preferred him to be in puppet form.
Got it.
Some people thought that performance was the best part of the movie.
Yeah.
I've actually heard multiple people say that.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I would also say that Annette is not to be confused with another film that came out very close to it, which is Tenet. The 2020 film, the Christopher Nolan film starring John David Washington and Robert Pattinson. I have not seen this one, but this is the movie that stays in my head as the dangled carrot, please, pretty please come back to the movie theaters.
Yeah.
Plea.
I like Tenet a lot.
I do too.
I think Tenet's great. And I think that I don't always want to be that person that's like, you have to see it twice. But I actually really think you have to see Tenet twice. The first time I saw it, I was like, maybe. And the second time I was like, I absolutely get it. This clicks with me 100%. So give Tenet a try twice.
As someone who has seen Tenet twice, I concur.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the same category of Nolan movie as Inception.
Yeah.
On a number of levels.
Speaking of which, this movie starring Marion Cotillard.
This is true. Yeah. Possibly foreshadowing some ideas for later.
But of course, yes.
But before we get to the movie itself, I mean, I think I
think we've stated some stuff that it clearly isn't. Yeah.
But it seems like maybe we're running off all the titles that with a female name that has a suffix of ETTE. And in that spirit, Annette is not to be confused with Babette's Feast.
Oh, great movie. Good one.
I still have to see it.
Yeah, this is a classic.
Danish drama from 1987, I believe, won the Best International Feature Oscar that year.
Yeah.
I've heard
my
it
birth
is,
year.
Yes. It's as old as Emilio.
Yes, it is.
But I believe I've heard that this is one of the great foodie movies.
Yeah. This movie will make you want to eat.
Yeah.
Big time. It's good.
Well, that's not hard.
Yeah, maybe watch it. Maybe watch it before dinner. But yes, no, we are not talking about Babette's Feast. We are talking about Annette, which I think we can say metaphorically is a narrative feast.
It's a feast of something.
Yeah.
But I guess as we dig into this to this feast of something, I mean, what is Annette really about?
That's a great question.
Yeah. I can't wait to hear what this is.
I think that's the central question
of the film.
Is what is this about?
Yeah.
And I'm going to try my best. Stand-up comedian Henry McHenry, known by his stage name The Ape of God, announces to his captive audience that he is engaged to operatic soprano Anne Desfreneau. He doesn't seem at all fazed by their surprise. He also doesn't understand what she sees in him. Their whirlwind romance soon leads them down the aisle and not long after produces a baby girl by the name of Annette, portrayed by a marionette puppet. If there is anything strangely unique about this child, Henry and Anne certainly don't seem to notice. However, as Anne's star continues to rise and Henry's combative nature causes his career to stumble, our young couple must reckon with the increasingly fraught nature of their relationship. In an attempt at salvaging their marriage and family, the trio take off on their yacht, but are soon caught in a perilous storm. A late-night tragedy shrinks their family to two, but also uncovers a unique talent from baby Annette.
Yep.
That's
I think so.
Dun, dun.
It's
you have
one
to
of those movies
watch
that
to see the rest.
I think aesthetically leaves you with a lot to process, but when you go down to the narrative, it's like actually surprisingly simple to describe.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about that actually, that I think there is a simplicity to this story that maybe we'll talk more about that later.
But yeah, so Annette, this was a movie that came out almost 5 years before this recording. And this, that year, 2021, is an auspicious year in the career of the duo Sparks. At the core of this story, the originators of the idea, the composers of the music, Ron and Russell Mael, those are their names. And so shortly before this film came out, there was a documentary about them called The Sparks Brothers, directed by Edgar Wright. Which for me, and I think many people, was a proper introduction to the band, despite the fact that it was released around the 50-year anniversary of their music career.
Yeah.
But it was an introduction for me, and then Annette came out about a month and a half later in August of 2021. And, Madeline and I, we didn't know each other yet at that point, but we later found out that this was something we had both experienced at the time that it came out.
Yeah.
I'll speak for myself first, but Sparks, when I saw the Edgar Wright documentary, I thought, how have I not been a fan of this band for so many years? This band speaks to my sensibilities in so many ways, whether it be the unwillingness to conform to genre convention, the expansiveness of their musical influences and talents, the cheeky nature of many of their lyrics combined with some truly profound messages. And also just how composed their presentation as a band is.
Yeah.
With their, very conspicuously Beatles-influenced appearance, at least in certain settings. Yeah. But so then, that's how I get into this band. And then I see Annette that summer figuring, and we'll get a little more into reactions, but so I see Annette that summer and I think, a lot to process here, but I generally like it. I'm still pretty new to Sparks at that time. And so then some months later, in March of 2022, Sparks are going on tour following this documentary and Annette. And I go to see them at Town Hall. And I'm waiting in the audience before the show starts. You can guess what song it started with. And I look behind me a few rows. And by this time, we had met. And then I see Madeline and her partner, Dougie, waving to me, and I'm like, oh wait, you're here too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk about this movie is that Sparks is so much of the inception of our friendship.
The spark
of our friendship.
Yeah.
And I think you could maybe argue that this podcast would not exist without Sparks in a way, because I don't know that we would have become friends as quickly or recognized that we both have these like similarly weird tastes.
Yeah.
But we ran into each other at the Sparks concert at that time at the Town Hall. And I think it just helped us realize like, oh, we're on a similar wavelength when it comes to art.
Yeah. And, shortly after that, we figured out, we have a mutual interest in, say, David Lynch or Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
And those are things, not every other person you meet on the street is into that specific grouping of things. But yeah, so, and that was an incredible concert too.
Oh yeah, they were great.
Yeah.
And you've seen them since then.
I have. Yeah. That was the first of what are now 3 times that I've seen them.
That's still the only time I've seen them, but rewatching this, I'm like, man, I want to see them again. I mean, they tour pretty much constantly, but they also tour like all over the world. So I need to see when they're in New York next, because I would love to see them again. They put on such a fun show. I think part of the reason I like this movie so much is because even though they're not in it that much, you still feel the like theatricality from them. I think in this film, they're so fun to watch. And I think this is a fun and interesting movie to watch.
Yes. And I think that this movie really is elemental to the conception of this episode cycle too of Offbeat Musicals. I don't know like what the first idea was that came up in this group of films that we're discussing, but this was certainly there at the beginning.
Yeah.
And well, we knew that, we with our specific confluence of interests had both seen the movie and enjoyed it when it came out, and figured reasonably that our co-host, Emilio, would be coming to it for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is my first introduction to anything Sparks related.
Other than just the two of us, like constantly talking about
yeah,
Sparks.
yeah. No, and I said before we started recording that I had intentions of listening to a little bit more of their music. Life is lifed, and I have a family outside of this podcast, and so a lot of important things.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
I said, and inside this podcast.
Oh, yes. Well, that's very, very sweet of you to say. But so there we go. There's two families that I play a role in, and the other one I had
the important one. That's fine.
had things that had precedence, and so I watched it this morning, which is very unusual for me when it comes to preparation for anything on this podcast. That was the first time I ever heard any note that was sung by a male brother.
A Spark.
Yes. So I'm like, this is super, super new to me. And I kind of was expecting it to feel new. How about you, Kelly?
It's definitely new for me too. I am in a similar camp. I had not heard any Sparks music before this particular movie, but it's definitely an interesting style that I'm sure we'll get into in one of the later questions, maybe.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, so I knew of Sparks before the Sparks Brothers documentary because Dougie's a big fan of Sparks, but even further back, I was first exposed to Sparks because Sparks have a cameo in an episode of Gilmore Girls. And I know that sounds a little weird.
No, that's awesome.
And coincidentally, I got to that episode in my current rewatch of Gilmore Girls yesterday.
Wow.
Completely by coincidence.
There we go. Serendipity. Yep.
So there's this episode. It's actually the last Amy Sherman Palladino episode because she's not involved in the last season. So if you don't count like the revival year in the life, it's the last Amy Sherman Palladino episode that she's involved in of the original run of Gilmore Girls. And it's like the town troubadour of Stars Hollow and Gilmore Girls is discovered and is taken away to open on a Neil Young tour. And so suddenly the East Coast troubadour community invades Stars Hollow thinking that they will also get discovered.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
these
so funny.
East Coast troubadours are played by various musician cameos, including Sparks and also Sonic Youth and also Yola Tango. So like you can say a lot about Amy Sherman Palladino, but she has really good taste in music.
I know. I was going to say, would she be the one to make those decisions?
I think so. And
Cool.
on this current rewatch, I've noticed that Sparks are actually referenced a lot in Gilmore Girls. I counted at least like 5 times.
That's meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
All right.
that she seems to be a big Sparks fan. But I'm sure that I saw this episode for the first time when I was like 13 or 14. But I don't know that if you're a 13-year-old girl and you watch Sparks' cameo in Gilmore Girls, it's not something that's going to make you want to go out and like seek out Sparks.
Is there something about the
It's
presentation?
just a little, I think intentionally kind of like campy and a little
Okay.
cheesy.
Yeah.
And it's, the whole thing is that like the, de facto mayor of the town is like really upset at like all these people, these musicians, they're so loud and they're loitering and all that kind of thing. So they're kind of presented as like, here's these bunch of bums that have like invaded our town
Right.
to an extent. But it's also like Sparks, as I think you guys are probably starting to realize, it's like kind of an acquired taste.
Definitely.
Like they have
Yeah.
a very particular like musical style.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Just go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think that, if you're a fan of Sparks or like a fan of Sparks would also naturally be into groups like the Magnetic Fields
Yeah.
or like They Might Be Giants. In fact, They Might Be Giants opened for Sparks a few years ago, I think at the Hollywood Bowl. I also rewatched the documentary in preparation for the conversation this week. And it should be said too that though they are a band that have taken a long time to really get their due in terms of recognition, that there are a lot of esteemed people who are massive fans of them. Like some of the talking heads that you see in the documentary are not any of the members of the band Talking Heads, but you do see people like Fred Armisen, Mike Myers, You see two different members of Duran Duran who each have an individual Duran under their names, and they're shown on screen.
Very
Excellent.
nice.
You see
Good choice.
Amy Sherman Palladino,
Yeah.
And her husband, I think,
Daniel
Palladino. Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth, also featured on Gilmore Girls in that one episode. And then you see like Weird Al Yankovic is there, credited as an accordion player.
You're a big Weird Al fan.
Love Weird Al.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. Me too.
I've seen Weird Al 3 times in concert.
He's the
The fact that Weird Al is a fan of Sparks makes me significantly more a fan of Sparks.
Amazing.
It's just by like the transitive property.
Truly.
Yeah. There's also like Jason Schwartzman appears in the documentary too and is credited as Talia Shire's son.
I like this. They're being very cheeky with how they're credited.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
thing about Sparks is I
This
think
is
they're
Edgar Wright, right?
Yeah, Edgar
Yeah.
Wright. They're oft referenced as your favorite musician's favorite musician.
Yes.
I think the Sparks Brothers documentary does a good job of portraying that.
Absolutely. There's even a moment in it where Beck says that I think he says he scarcely has a conversation on a tour bus that doesn't at some point come back to Sparks. There's a great segment in it where Jack Antonoff, who's also a fan, breaks down a song of theirs called Dick Around and describes why it's a perfect deconstruction of a pop song. But it's something that becomes clear in that documentary that sets us up nicely for this discussion is that, so Sparks, they are exemplary musicians. They have an iconic discography. I think there's only great music that they have made. They're also a great band for a cinephile to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
They were interested in movies from young ages. In fact, Russell Mael made a student film at UCLA called Très Sérieux in the 1960s. And so they were coming of age in the 1960s. They were fans of the French New Wave and Ingmar Bergman. And then they made several attempts though they are primarily musicians, they made several attempts at making films throughout their career, their shared career. And the first one, at least that I think is widely known, is that they were briefly collaborating with Jacques Tati.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
It was either in the late 70s or early 80s. And he was in poor health at the time. And,
I was going to say that would have been at the very end of his career.
Yeah. And was not able to go through with the project that they were attached to.
Having seen Annette, there's a very interesting comparison there. It's like that Dali Buñuel thing. Like these are artists that are really looking to align themselves with very particular voices. And Tati is like a really interesting one to consider.
Yeah.
Having just seen Annette.
The script of Tati's that they were attached to work on was called Confusion, but sadly it never materialized. Then their second attempt as authors to get involved in a film was they were trying to adapt a manga called My the Psychic Girl in the early 90s, and for a little while Tim Burton was attached to direct.
Wow.
Yeah, and sadly that did not materialize because I don't know if the reasons are clear, but he opted to work on The Nightmare Before Christmas and Ed Wood instead.
Probably a good choice.
Yeah, those are both
fantastic movies.
Yeah, great films.
Yeah. And
although Tim Burton, notably not the director of A Nightmare Before Christmas.
This is true.
That is true.
Yeah. Henry Selick is the director.
But it's still Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a brief resurgence of this idea, I think, in the 2000s, but that never came to fruition. But then the brothers Mael conceived of this story, Annette, in around, as they put it, around 2012, and presented the idea to Leos Carax, of whom they were both fans, shortly afterward. And he was, as it sounds, he was immediately interested. And then, though it took a little while, the rest is history from there.
Yeah, he said on a podcast I was listening to that he was a big fan of Sparks because he was a fan of them as a kid. And he mentioned that he and his friends used to like steal vinyl records and then resell them at school.
Upstanding behavior, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, and that one that he remembers stealing and it really sticking with him is Propaganda, which he points out it's partially due to the album cover, which is of the Sparks brothers, Ron and Russell Mael, being kidnapped on a boat. It is very evocative. I see why it would stick with him for 50 years afterward.
Yeah, and with that as a great example, there's some great Sparks album art out there.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so here we are talking about the confluence of Leos Carax and Sparks. I've been saying a lot. I think it's clear that I'm a fan of Annette, but what are our general thoughts on Annette, whether you're a newcomer to it or not?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting film. I think there would be a world. I have seen it now for the first time, and I think there would be a world in which I would watch it again and maybe glean something different. I got stuck in the trap early in the movie of trying to figure out what was happening and what it meant and what, those kinds of things. I think by the second, half of the movie, the second act per se, I've settled in a little bit and tried to enjoy more of the visuals and get a little more loosey-goosey about it.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. I think some of the visuals are absolutely stunning. I think that it's a very original work. I think that the kind of main virtue of the film is kind of originality and authenticity and trying to push that boundary of, what is acceptable, what is relatable, what is, a way that we can tell a story unconventionally.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Those would be my surface thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very well said. This is a movie that I saw in theaters. I saw it at the IFC Center when it came out.
Same.
And I was kind of all in on it, I think, from the beginning, and I was trying to get people to go see this movie. But I actually think now that I'm a little older and have matured a little bit, I think this is the kind of movie that I can only recommend to like a very particular taste. And I don't even know that, outside of this podcast, this is a movie I would naturally recommend to you, Emilio. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. But I had a lot of fun revisiting this. I grew up going to the opera occasionally. I really have a respect for opera. And I don't get into the rock opera genre that much in adulthood. I really enjoyed this particular take on it. And I like the fact that it does play with traditional, like, melodrama, like operatic tropes. It does a good job of, I think, mixing that with these like modern sensibilities. Like you have Annette at like what seems to be the Super Bowl, like things like that, which obviously feel like totally left field from typical operatic tropes. But I think that combo is really interesting, and it has some like narrative dissonance that I find really appealing, but I could see could be off-putting to others.
I knew this as the Adam Driver puppet musical movie when it came out. I knew very little besides that. And 2021 is, I think, really interesting because it's smack dab in that phase of Adam Driver's career where he's both bankable and well known, but also he seems very interested in doing like daring artistic work, working with auteurs. And this movie and Megalopolis, to me, feel very similarly yoked projects, at least, in that it's like they're big swings and they're not really for everyone. And that these like respected auteurs are like really not interested in public opinion or critics or anything of that nature. Yeah, I like that was my background, and going into the movie right before I hit play, that was kind of like what I felt like I knew about this movie going into it. Big swing of a movie, very experimental theater to me. That's kind of the thing that jumped out. You talked about the opera. I also felt that too. I felt like this movie was trying to kind of get some of the zhuzh from opera, like very specifically impressionistic, understanding that we're in a black box and not really trying to hide that there's a facade here that's very present, even though a lot visually looks really interesting. Some of it also feels like it's CGI, and they're not trying to make it not seem that way. It's like it just is what it is. Here's what I'll say. I think it has very interesting themes. I think it has some very compelling moments and visuals, some that I think will stay with me for quite a while. I totally respect the moves here. And I don't even know how outwardly critical I think I will be of this movie throughout this conversation, because I think that it's very competently made. There is something nagging at me, though, and I think it's just my personal taste. Like,
Yeah.
I just think this is not really my vibe. But so like I don't think I would like recommend this movie from a perspective of I really liked this and I think somebody else should see it. But I fully believe that this is a movie, like a lot of experimental work, is better when you have the opportunity to talk about it. Like I think
exactly.
that this is
Agreed.
like that, like, and this sounds like a dig at the movie, and it only like 10% is that it's like it's work to get through this movie.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the other side of it, if you have the ability to do what we're doing right now and talk about it with friends, I think the movie feels like there's more there. And I know I'm projecting about what we've started and
But I
what
think
we're going to get
accurately.
into. That's where I feel like my head is at right now.
No, and
Yeah.
and I think something that you both being first time watchers are alluding to, and Julian, you alluded to about your first time watching, and I think I felt as well, is that it's like, oh, I don't really know what to make of this necessarily. And something, as you're saying, having an opportunity to talk through that, I
Yeah.
think is very
Yeah.
helpful to appreciating this movie.
Absolutely. This might be a little inside baseball here, but I like in preparing for this conversation, I grew to appreciate the movie more
Yeah.
than I did as soon as the credits rolled.
Totally.
I was like, I don't know what that was. I have a lot of questions.
So you didn't listen to them in the credits telling you to go tell all your friends to see this movie.
I did not listen to them saying that.
It's a nice little button,
Yeah.
considering how the movie starts.
breathing will not be tolerated.
Or farting, for that matter.
Yeah. But in trying to prepare for this conversation and have a more holistic view of the piece, I'm finding, oh, well, this element here, I think I actually have an idea of why they did that.
Yeah.
Oh, this thing might be a reference over here,
Yeah.
and or it might not. Let's talk about it, And those are the things that I think really give this piece some weight.
Totally.
There's a lot there. And a lot of it hit me right away. Like, I was like, oh, that was cool. That was clever. That was interesting.
I was listening to this interview with the Brothers Mail from around the time of its release. It was just on I think it's normally a publication, but their sort of podcast outlet called Film Weekly. It was technically / Film Weekly.
Yeah, I listened to this as well.
Yeah, where they were talking about how I think they had just been kind of enticed by the idea of composing in the long form for a while. Originally, that Annette, like in their conception, could have been a stage show too.
Yeah, they mentioned they planned on doing this live, and like they would be performing these songs live, and they would bring in like an opera singer to do the Anne part before they ever brought it to Leo's Carax.
Yeah. So it's interesting to imagine the might have been there. But I'm glad that it's in film form. But yeah, I think that the first experience I had with the movie, though I still had some questions, I quite enjoyed it. I think I was, just as a newcomer to the Sparks legacy, I was very open-minded about what it brought to me, both in terms of their music and in terms of Leos Carax's direction. And coming back to it years later, I think I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to do this, not just for our discussion, but also to, just to add to my understanding of the movie and seeing all these different layers of connection and meaning that I could not have picked up on the first time. And we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So watching Annette, one of the things that kept coming to me over and over literally was repetition. Not just in motifs, but also in the words themselves. Like, I feel like phrases are just repeated over and over and over again, sometimes even volleying back and forth between different characters. And I wanted to ask you all, especially the other half of the table over here, Madeline and Julian, who are better versed in all things Sparks, like, what do we make of that choice? And also, I'm wondering if we see repetition as a greater theme throughout the film in other ways.
Yeah, so repetition, I mean, the first thought I have to respond to that question is that repetition is absolutely a trend of the Sparks writing style.
Yeah.
I think that, I'll take this moment to highlight a point in their studio discography, which is with I think one of their great albums, Lil Beethoven, which was released in 2002. And, that's like 30 years into their recording career, but it's even at that point seen as kind of a different spin on how they write. And that's an album where like someone in the documentary about them said that there's almost like a Steve Reich element
Okay.
in that the composition of many of the songs on that album. There's, I mean, the song that's really focused on in the documentary is called My Baby's Taking Me Home, which has just that one line. It goes like, home, my baby's taking me home. And the whole song is that with chord changes surrounding it. But I think
they do that great live.
Yeah. Yes, having seen it live, I can attest to that. One of the speakers in the documentary too points out how, like, despite the fact that it's one line, there's a real journey in that song, both musically and emotionally, as Russell keeps singing the same line over and over again. And then, so that album has a few other songs that have that trend to them, but I think I see that in Annette as well. When it comes to repetition in the movie, the first line and musical motif that comes to my mind that exemplifies this is, we love each other so much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We got quite a bit of that.
Yeah. In many different settings. Totally.
And I think at the first instance of that in the film, I was, even all the way back in 2021, I was struck by the repetition there. It's like, oh yeah, that's like, this really is going to be like this song that they're not going to like expose this lyric very much. They're just going to let you sit with it.
And one thing that I like about that song is the way that they incorporate it later in a diegetic way.
Yeah.
And I always find that really interesting. It's like the way that they do it here is that baby Annette is playing this song on the piano.
Yeah.
And Henry comes in and he is like, why did you teach her that song? That was my song with Anne. And it becomes a really big like sticking point for him. And it then reveals, the background between the accompanist and Anne potentially. And like, oh, is Annette potentially actually the accompanist's daughter and not Henry? Like it unravels so much of the foundation of this relationship and of this family, potentially. It just like kind of plants that seed. And it comes from the fact that this song is now exists in universe.
Yeah. Yeah, I noted that too watching it. It's not often that you see that happen in any kind of musical. And so a great example both musically and narratively of that same tendency in My Baby's Taking Me Home, of just taking one line and kind of shifting the angle of it.
Yeah.
But then there are a few additional lyrics that add depth to it. You have, we're scoffing at logic, this wasn't the plan, we love each other so much. Or counterintuitive, baby, and yet we remain, we love each other so much. You don't know much about the characters at this point, so this is really, it serves as both exposition, and yet it's kind of coy too. You don't really know what is so counterintuitive about their romance. You kind of just have to take their word for it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was jumping out to me is this thing, they call it semantic satiation, which is the act of hearing a word or phrase over and over and over and over and over again. And if you just keep hearing the same word over, it stops sounding like a word that you know and starts to sound like other things.
Yeah.
And so to me, I was wondering if they were playing with that concept also of like love, the word love, and this idea that phrase, oh, but we're in love or we love one another, is this thing that it's something that is, I think, said over and over in partnerships amongst lovers and couplings and stuff. But this idea that you just kind of keep going back to that as this foundation when things go bad or when things become difficult, that you're like, there's this one thing that we can count on, right?
Yeah.
But if you keep hearing it or saying it over and over again, then does it really actually mean the thing that we ascribe to it?
Or are you trying to convince yourself
Yeah.
or your partner
Exactly.
of that thing by repeating it over and over and over again?
Right.
Yeah, because as you said, Julian, we don't know much about them. We also don't ever really learn like how they met or anything about their kind of courtship at all.
Right.
So they're playing against the fact that the public seems to, think this relationship is kind of ridiculous and like that they're, not well suited. And so it almost feels like they're trying to convince themselves and each other, but also the rest of the world. Like,
yeah.
oh, but we love each other so much. Like you can't, we are protected.
You can't
from,
push back on that. Yeah.
We're protected from your criticism because we love each other. And we're just going to keep reminding you of that fact.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the publicity element, I mean, that's an interesting motif throughout this film, too. That I think some of the great moments of Leos Carax leaning into expressionism occur around that, where, like, you know, you'll see sort of like a TMZ style story about the couple, like, you know, that they are expecting their first child.
And every time you see that, it's the same musical motif also.
Right.
Yeah. I was thinking of like Extra or Entertainment Tonight.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
There's like a person narrating, and I rather like that. I mean, as a vehicle for exposition, I thought it was kind of fun.
Because it really does, it moves you along to what's about to happen next. You know, you don't need to see her take a pregnancy test. It's just like, hello, and now she is pregnant. Here are paparazzi pictures of her being pregnant. Oh, now they are going on their yacht. It is being reported, and now here we're on the yacht. Like it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, it was really interesting to me that as part of this musical, I come from the world of musical theater, which is, you know, obviously related to this world, but not so specific. And one of the things that interested me about this movie is very few of the musical elements actually moved the plot forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Even, you know, most of them were, hey, let's add some context to this moment. Some of them didn't add any context at all.
Right.
And I would say very few of them actually moved the plot forward. I think the one notable exception I can think of was the scene in the police station. After the tragic yacht accident.
I want to come back to that. Yeah.
And, you know, at least then, like, a scene happened in the song. Like, they went from accusing him to not accusing him and him leaving.
It's like he's able to defend himself through song.
Well,
right.
To add to your point, Kelly, that they did make me think of one other scene that accomplishes this, which, speaking of accusations, 6 women have come forward.
But I interpreted that as a dream.
Oh, interesting.
Oh.
Well, this is also
cool.
This is a movie where, like, the sense of dream and reality a little murky.
Very much,
definitely.
I mean,
murky. Because to your point, you know, one of these songs exists in the world of, you know, in the reality, and some of these songs happen entirely out of time. The world pauses and stops, and the song happens, and then they pick right back up where they left off.
Right. And it's, well, I mean, on the topic of the plot moving forward, it really feels like, and these are not, you know, still not in the typical sense of more conventional musicals operating with those machinations, but I sort of feel like the 2 prolonged stand-up routines that we see Henry perform at the beginning and then kind of the middle of the movie, like there's almost more like narrative thrust there.
Particularly the second one, I think.
Yeah, and you learn some important things about his character in both of those. In fact, actually, the very first performance, like that's where you learn that he and Anne are even a couple of some kind. But then, well, going back to this point of repetition, I mean, sorry to jump all the way to the end so early in the conversation, but
let's do it. Let's go.
I think the final song of the movie, pre-credits that is another good showcase of repetition. You know, that Annette finally gets to confront her father about his wrongdoing. And then the line that keeps coming up there is, I'm forgetting exactly the wording, but I'm thinking
there's nothing left to love or something.
Or it's like you'll have no one to love.
Yeah. I mean, I that to me was the most overt. Like, we're doing something with this repetition to sub in those words and be like, you heard it this way so many times before. We're switching it up, and now there's narrative weight that's attached to this, and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely something to be said, again, coming from the theater world, for repetition. I mean, I'm not a big Meisner guy, I'm the first to say, but Meisner repetition exercises are kind of integral to a lot of acting, and how you can access your emotions and other people's emotions by repeating one line and telling a story through that one line.
Yeah.
That being said, I was also, especially in the first half of the movie that I watched, when I'm, really trying to grapple with what is happening and what this movie is trying to portray itself as, that I was really frustrated by these repeating lyrics. Saying, in my mind, I'm like, this is not an efficient use of language. Like, this is, I understand this point. Like, do you want to elaborate?
Yes.
And so when you decide to put something up on stage, you're making these decisions specifically.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when I try to put something up on stage, I want to give as much color and as much context as possible. These folks have taken a different tack, which is totally wonderful. And I think we can explore a lot of those same emotions through the repetition. But that is definitely not something that I was prepared for going into the movie. It is something that
same.
I had to settle into throughout.
Yeah. I felt very similar to you, where it was like, I got it. I see what's going on here. It didn't move me one way or the other. I wasn't like, oh, this is like a clever subversion of musical theater tropes. But I also wasn't like, this is really lame. It landed somewhere in between for me.
Well, we were talking earlier a little bit about the simplicity that there is in this film, as bombastic as it can kind of be and as in your face as it can be, like visually, and even with certain points of the story. Overall, I think like the bones of what the story are fairly straightforward. And I think that the choice to make the lyrics in particular and the dialogue very repetitive just plays into the fact that this is at its core like a melodrama. Like it's a melodrama rock opera. And I think that if you look back to, like, we recently released our Written on the Wind episode, like if you look back to movies like that, there is at their basis of a melodrama film like that, a very simplistic story.
Yeah. And simple like dynamics between people.
Exactly.
Like stuff that you can sum up in one or two sentences.
And that's like not a fault of those films or this film.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just part of the style.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's the choice.
Yeah, and that in that Film Weekly interview with Ron and Russell Mael, they were talking about how, like, despite the fact that this story this was not intended at the time of its writing, but that there are a few references that can be made to the Me Too movement, or really like not references directly, but common elements that can be related to that. That to them it was always really a story about a relationship.
Yeah, because they wrote it prior to the Me Too as a movement.
Yeah,
but not prior to like men being really
exactly.
terrible.
Yeah.
They've been doing that for a long time.
Unfortunately, it's been around.
Well, I remember like clocking that detail watching Annette at the IFC Center in August 2021, August 16th to be exact.
I saw it before you, and I only know the date because I posted about it on Instagram, and I saw it on August 6th. Or at least I posted about it on August 6th.
I think that was the day it came out.
Well,
so
that sounds right.
Yeah. But I remember like sitting in the theater and thinking, especially with during that Six Women Have Come Forward musical number, it's like, oh, well, is this like meant to be in dialogue with Me Too? But I could also kind of sense just from the general sway of the movie that I don't really think that was the goal here.
Yeah.
And so, just like it was, a little bit like some of the same thoughts as watching Tar.
I was just going to bring up Tar. I was like, Tar feels very different. Tar feels like a response to the time. Some of the things for me with Tar are the use of technology.
Well, sure.
And then also some of the like specific identity issues that come up throughout that movie that feel very pointedly about the time that this is all happening in. But your point is also taken, which is that this type of thing can look different, but you can still get at these very core issues of like a very troubled person.
Right.
Yeah. While we're talking about Tar, I just want to say that I am very picky about conductors in movies. I think that Tar is a good example of a good conductor, and I think this movie is a good example of a good conductor in a movie. And I think Simon Helberg does a really nice job of not only like conducting in a way that I think gets across like the time signature he's using, but I also think his body movement, his body language, I think he does a really excellent job.
So conducting musical accuracy very high in this.
Yes.
Also, his piano playing.
Yeah, that looked accurate as well.
Yeah, it's and like when you see like what he's playing on the piano mixed with what he's singing at the same time, holy cow! It's like Simon Helberg gives an incredible performance in this movie.
Yeah.
Very committed.
Yeah, despite like relatively low screen time.
Yeah, I will never forgive Big Bang Theory for what they've done to this man's career, because I think that this movie is a really good example of the kind of range that he has. And I just feel like he was stuck in that world for so long.
Stifled.
And it like really pisses me off.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But actually, you know, while the Tar anecdote is still nearby, worth mentioning too that Cate Blanchett starred in a Sparks video.
Yes.
Yeah, for The Girl Is Crying in Her Latte in 2023. And then I think there was, I don't know if it was a top comment, but a comment on their Instagram post of that video where someone wrote, "Why would Sparks work with Lydia Tarr after everything she's done?" Yeah.
They did not do their homework. or they did.
Yeah.
And they really did.
So we talked a little bit already about how Henry and Anne are a pretty unlikely pairing, referred to by the fictional tabloid as Beauty and the Bastard. And Henry says in his comedy set that he doesn't know what she sees in him. So I just wanted to ask you guys, how does the difference in the way that these two are characterized and this widening gap in the success of their respective careers, how do you think it influences their relationship and also contribute to, spoiler alert, Anne's untimely passing?
Well,
I didn't see that part. Different movie.
I fell asleep.
Oh no!
I looked away.
Well, I think with Henry, there is certainly a sense, even before you know much about the relationship, that you know when you see his comedy performances, you can kind of feel that he is doomed from the beginning.
But he's selling out the Orpheum.
I mean, is the Ape of God really like good?
It's
as a show.
Is it a good set or a good stage name?
Well, it's, you know,
that's right.
Funny even to call it a stand-up show, because to me it just felt more like a one-man performance.
Yeah, it was like this weird Jake LaMotta like thing, and then he like comes out and he's like Mitch Hedberg or something. He's like really quiet and like, oh man, I was really trying to figure out what his vibe was, man.
Yeah.
There's somebody else who I'm thinking of, the really quiet, really that guy who like talks like this. His voice doesn't go up any further. It doesn't go any higher than this. Okay, that was the guy.
It's a good impression.
Okay,
I can't remember.
I don't know.
Well, did any of you catch in the end credits the Adam Driver special thanks there?
Yes, Adam Driver thanks Chris Rock and also Bill Burr.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Neither of whom are that kind of comic.
Definitely, but the one who I'm thinking of is Stephen Wright.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was interesting because you don't get a Chris Rock or a Bill Burr vibe from Henry McHenry.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like definitely a feeling watching it, and you know, because you're not in the audience in the room with him. Although I feel like that audience would feel this too, that it's like, oh, like, you know, something's wrong with this guy.
Definitely.
But I feel like he's getting at times a pretty positive response from the audience.
That's
like,
what is, I mean, I know this is a movie, and so there's a little bit of that, but I'm with you.
And I feel like, you know, again, he's selling out the Orpheum. Like, he is at the beginning of the film very successful, and it's not like people are going to the show not knowing what they're in for.
Oh no, they're with him for, like, every step of the way.
It feels like Bo Burnham-y or John Mulaney-y when they're on their way down.
Yeah, exactly. I think I saw a Letterboxd review that was like, Adam Driver plays evil Bo Burnham.
Yeah. I also, like, the physical resemblance also made me think of Andrew Schultz a little bit. The kind of brooding. I just think Adam Driver kind of has that vibe. But,
and then there are a few moments with like the backup singers, or just like, you know, when there is like silence when they're
when
when they're supposed to be reactions where you can't help but think this is a little more surface level, but of Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But even so, like Andy Kaufman, you can feel that there is like something oddly intentional about his subversions, and whereas it feels a bit like Henry McHenry, that he is like truly improvising at some of those moments. But then going to this question of their relationship.
Yeah, sorry. Go for
That's
it.
okay.
Yeah.
But this question of their relationship. So I think, without learning too much about either character, you can detect that Henry is troubled and that Anne is more content with her work. It's what's occurring to me is I feel like you see a lot of the indicators as to like what the state of their relationship is, but I honestly feel like I'm having a little trouble getting to the why of it.
Yeah, I don't know that either of them.
A lot of
have gotten the
unanswered
why
questions.
either.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes the film is very like it I think does a really obvious job of being like, again, Beauty and the Bastard. At the very beginning, right after So May We Start is done, he rides off in a motorcycle and she drives off in like a fancy SUV. And when they first like reunite after their respective sets, like she asks him like, "Oh, how was your set?" And he says, "I killed them." And he asks her how hers went, and she says, "Oh, I saved them."
Right.
It's like the movie is trying to be very obvious about how like, oh, well, she is kind of this like angelic perfect thing, and he is this like kind of fallen like filth.
Right.
And I don't know the why necessarily.
But you get a little bit of backstory. The exposition part comes in Girl from the Middle of Nowhere. You have lines like, she had the voice of a goddess, strings, winds, and horns inside her chest. Hour after hour, she would struggle till her voice became her royal realm. She headed west, the wild direction, no longer plain, no longer plump. The men are on her doorstep. Many men are on her doorstep. Her voice had brought her beauty and set her free. So this gives an interesting insight into her process of coming up as a musician. That it feels like a familiar tale of like, you recognize you have a talent and suddenly people want a piece of you.
Yeah.
And Henry, as we learn once Annette is born, that he, in a kind of a literal sense, wants a piece of this relationship because, already he's referring to Annette, the baby, as his baby, not as theirs. And then there's a lot of terms that refer to him alone as opposed to them as a relationship. So, ultimately he doesn't really seem to understand why they're together. And I think that, in accounting for his responsibility in the downfall of their relationship, that he's in it for himself, and then in order to satisfy his own selfish desires, he's outwardly destructive.
Depression's a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering when that was going to come up too.
Oh yeah, I mean that, to answer your question, Maddie, I think depression, especially acute depression, seems like untreated depression.
Yeah, and addiction.
And all these kinds of detriments that he's, really not trying to ameliorate in any kind of way. Drag him down.
Yeah.
Make it hard to be around you. And I know it feels more comfortable when you're in it to be like, I'm self-deprecating, I can't do this, I can't, to put yourself down, to put yourself in a place of being powerless, feels better when you're in that state of mind. Takes the pressure off when you're in that state of mind. But makes it a whole lot harder to be around. Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of let himself go in this direction where, depending on your particular view of it, he didn't have to.
Yeah, because she has chosen to be with him. So, but from the very beginning of when we are introduced to their relationship, when he introduces us, he's immediately being like, "Yeah, I don't get it either."
Yeah, but then I'm thinking now of the line you mentioned earlier, Madeline, of when they have both just performed and Anne says about her audience, "I saved them."
Yeah.
That maybe there's a part of her that, like a savior complex in this relationship, that she believes that she can rescue Henry. And, sadly that hope is misplaced. But, maybe if she's going to go so far as to raise a child with him, that, maybe there's a sense that like if she can't rescue him, then that she can do something good for his offspring.
It's a terrible blunder. You can't save him.
Yeah.
Don't try.
Yeah.
She really shouldn't have.
Don't stare into the abyss.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
And I think that when in like both of the scenes when Henry reveals that he's a killer, that there's like there's kind of a sense from the opposite character of like, you're not really gonna go there, are you?
Yeah.
That, you know, troubled as he is, they don't think that he's quite capable of doing that. Not that he seems like an innocent person, but I think there's just some incredulity at that idea.
But when he fully starts losing his audience in that second comedy set is, I think, when he's talking about, you know, killing her from tickling her to death or whatever. Like, it's his insistence of not letting that bit go, where people are like, all right, that's enough. Stop. Like, we don't want to hear you talk about killing your wife. And I do think that there is a part of him that like kind of wants to be hated, like that that is very self-sabotaging, because I do think he is very self-hating and he's dealing with depression, he's dealing with addiction, and he is hearing the audience reaction and choosing to kind of continue this particular bit for a really long time. He could have pivoted, but I just think he's in too deep at this point.
Yeah. And in the first stand-up performance that we see too, that there's a particular moment that really jolts, like almost literally jolts the audience when, you know, he's just kind of, you know, saying this meta statement about like, why did I become a comedian? And his answer to himself is to disarm people, to make them laugh. It's the only way I know how to tell the truth without being killed. And then seemingly to follow up that disarm joke, then, you know, there's audio of gunshots and the whole audience lurches up. I noticed there was one guy who was laughing his ass off in the middle of that.
Guy's
There's
loving
always one guy.
Yeah. It was kind of like in Bamboozled, how like there's one audience member in one of the scenes who's like kind of enjoying the performance while everyone else is scandalized.
Right.
Now I think we've made a few tangential comparisons along the way here, but do we want to officially go into our comparison corner?
Sure, let's do it.
Sounds good.
I can get us started here.
Go for it.
Yeah, so for the second episode in a row, I am going to harken back to a very early conversation that we had on this podcast. And this time, I'm actually going to do the very first conversation that we ever had on mic, because I would like to compare Annette to Mother,
Huh.
the Darren Aronofsky film from 2017.
I kind of see this.
Yeah, I mean, it's also an experimental film. I would argue that Mother's maybe a little bit more confrontational in its intensity, but I think they're both movies that are equally interested in relationship dynamics between artists and the way that someone usually gives something up of themselves in a relationship with an artist, and also the way that very selfish people commodify and exploit their children, and how artists can very easily become those kinds of people because they are often craving validation of some kind. So yeah, on vibes, a little different, but also like very similar to me.
Nice.
Mother. Yeah.
I could see that for sure.
Yeah. Well, in the tradition of the rock opera, there is another entry that once I thought about it some, I could actually see quite a few connections to in Annette. And this is, you know, you don't have to dig deep for this one. It's The Who's Tommy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the connections that hit me were that, well, so the character of Tommy is also like Annette, kind of the object of a bunch of people who surround him.
Yeah.
In his case, due to a pair of ailments.
Right.
But, you know, a character who is kind of the object of those surrounding, but also this sense of there being like a seemingly divine miracle somewhere in the story, as well as like having an uncanny talent. And, you know, in Tommy's case, of course, he's a pinball wizard.
Yep.
Has to be a twist. But, and then Annette, as we learned later in the film, has this singing talent, seemingly inherited from her mother. And also the sense, even though like it's different in terms of who it happens with, that there is an egotistical male character in the story too, and that like Tommy later on becomes more of that figure, whereas Henry is that in Annette. But the elements, there are common elements there.
I mean, it's such an iconic one.
Yeah. I don't know if it is like the very first rock opera, but certainly one of the formative ones.
Totally. I've got one from Dougie. He, in the vein of distorted children, he said this reminded him of If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a film that came out last year. And I don't think it's spoilery to say that in that film, for almost the entire movie, you don't see the child. The majority of the movie is focused on the mother, and the child is often with her in the car or in the house, and she's talking to her, but you never actually see the child's face through almost that entire movie. Whereas this movie obviously takes the distorted child thing in a slightly different direction. But that was something that Dougie compared, and I was like, yeah, I absolutely see that. If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You is getting into a lot more of like the difficulties of largely single parenthood. Whereas this movie, Adam Driver's character does become a single parent technically. But really, I don't know how much parenting he's doing. Seems like he's mostly handed it off to Simon Helberg at this point.
Yeah. Also, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You is in a different way a very expressionistic movie.
Totally.
Yeah. Cool. I like that.
Yeah.
I thought it would be interesting to juxtapose my watching of this film with my watching of The Room.
Okay.
Oh.
Tommy Wiseau's The Room.
Yeah.
I think both movies try really hard.
Yeah.
In different directions.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I love about The Room is that it tries so hard to be your cookie cutter movie, like to fit all the boxes. And the joy of that movie for me is how far they miss the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, spectacular. Amazing. Incredible. And then for this movie, I think they're trying so hard to push the boundary of what is acceptable in a movie theater. How do we tell this story to people in a way that they're not expecting?
On the general topic of expressionism and comparisons, there's one comparison that this movie calls a little more direct attention to, which is a formative movie in the life of Leos Carax, The Crowd, directed by King Vidor, released in 1928. It's a silent film. I actually think that there's a scene in Annette when after Henry is making a sick joke about babysitting, when you see black and white footage of an audience applauding. I believe it's directly from The Crowd.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. The Crowd is a movie that is also about parents struggling to get by. Just the fact that this is an important movie for Leos Carax and that it is about struggling parents as well.
Yeah.
I think, important to point that out too.
And this has been Comparison Corner.
Yes, it has.
Certainly has.
So in preparing to talk about Annette, we reached out to a past guest and realized that there was potentially some interest. And so we want to share what our past guest had to say about the movie Annette.
Hey, this is Shaun Seneviratne, writer and director of Ben and Suzanne, A Reunion in 4 Parts, and guest on the pod a couple months ago on the Found Footage episode. And I love Annette. I love Leos Carax. He is my favorite living director. And to talk about this movie, I haven't seen it in a while. I'm going to go back to my original review from August 23rd, 2021, when the movie came out on my Letterboxd. Here we go. More sunrise than A Star is Born. Annette is the modern version of an expressionist film from the 30s. Carax is operating in full Murnau mode. He also thanks King Vidor, another operatic and expressionistic director from that period. He understands the value of wild set pieces and inventive visual expression and gives that primacy over any kind of conventional storytelling or psychology. The enjoyment of this work and the work of all the great film directors comes from its surface value. This movie is a major release with one of today's biggest stars and streaming on a wide-reaching platform. It's got a narrative scenario similar to La La Land or A Star is Born. A lot of general audiences seemingly went into this knowing only Adam Driver musical. So imagine knowing only that and then experiencing this movie. Just like when Stravinsky played Rites of Spring and the audience, responding to the dissonance, rioted. When introduced to something totally new, like Rites of Spring, or the first time I heard Lightning Bolt, our brain perceives unfamiliar stimuli as noise, rejects it, and responds with hostility. But now, after having experienced a work that challenges and confounds expectations, the brain is hopefully primed for a similarly strange, unconventional work. Now, when we hear Stravinsky, we just hear it as beautiful, stirring classical music. Reading a lot of the negative reviews, there's a fair amount of quote-unquote style over substance comments. I encountered a similar thing when reading Zola reviews, my favorite movie of the year so far, back in 2021. General audiences are more comfortable with wild or complex narratives communicated conventionally than simple stories expressed unconventionally, placing more emphasis and value on the substance of a work, its content, its quote-unquote meaning, hence the truly cringe cottage industry of YouTube explainer videos. I'd like to make an appeal to put as much stock, if not more, into the style of a work. We're so conditioned through our education to look for a quote-unquote meaning and quote-unquote understand and unpack a work, as if a work of art is some esoteric cryptogram, that we don't often accept a work or appreciate it purely for its surfaces. Film is an audio-visual medium. Its surface value is, to me, its most important quality. Leos Carax knows how to give primacy to the image and deliver an aesthetic experience unlike most things that exist in this world. For more on this idea, read Susan Sontag's excellent essays on the subject, Against Interpretation and On Style. But whether you love it or hate it, how cool is it to see something that at least provokes some kind of response out of you? This is what I wrote in 2021, 100% stand by everything I said back then about film, about Leos Carax, and about this movie, Annette. Thanks.
Sweet. Very well said. Shaun is it's got away with words, man.
Definitely.
Totally. I think this kind of makes me think of my initial response to the movie, too. I think that I was enticed by the very clear efforts at expressionism on the part of Leos Carax.
Admittedly, I did think there were a few moments in this piece that I was like, I don't know why they made that choice.
Yeah.
For example, when the conductor and Henry McHenry have the confrontation about the song and the parentage of Annette, they barely looked at each other.
Yeah.
That whole scene.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
That feels like a direct eyeball to eyeball conversation to me.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think so much of like the cinematography in this is I don't know that there's like a close up at all in this movie. And I think that would have been, an example of a time to use one. But so much of this film kind of feels like either you are shooting it the way you would have to shoot people on stage, where they're like cheating out towards the audience in a way, or there's like a lot of tracking shots that's like a single shot with the camera falling around. And it's kind of like one of those two a lot of the time. It's not filmed in a more traditional way, the way that you film conversations in most movies.
Well, also, I mean, I think the musical aspect of this is a really important thing to consider there as well. That there's like a heightened way that these characters are interacting with one another that maybe is not supposed to actually reflect the way two men would have an argument. They're talking through one another, around one another. They're grappling with their own issues, and those issues actually like are not necessarily about the other person or what the other person did. It's a really interesting scene that you bring up there, Kelly, because it actually feels like they're magnets repelling now,
Yeah, it's to that point of the way that conversations are shot in the movie. I feel like one of the only scenes where it gets closer, not that close, but closer to the traditional conversational editing is in the very last scene, where you do have that like
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think very
Yeah, that's a good point.
intentionally it does
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have Henry and Annette, usually not in the same shot to, effectively convey the disconnect between them.
They're also like placed on opposite sides of a table.
Right.
So
Right,
there's only so many ways you can shoot that.
yeah, and eventually on opposite sides of a door too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mail brothers in that Film Weekly interview that Madeline and I both listened to, they said something too about like they were on the same page from the beginning with Leos Carax about not wanting to really wanting to make a musical, but not really with a lot of the Broadway traditions, and they were referring, in terms of vocal style as well as in terms of staging. Like they didn't really. There's a for lack of a better term, a grandiosity that often goes with Broadway that they didn't want here. They wanted something a little more intimate, personal, subdued, which I think
I
certainly.
don't know that I would describe anything in this movie as subdued.
Fair enough. Although
But
it's,
I see what you mean. They're
Yeah.
going for a different tonal choice
Yes.
than much of like traditional Broadway. That much is true.
Mhm.
I'd say that like both are grandiose and like different flavors of grandiose.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a lack of supported vocal production
Yeah.
in this piece.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think maybe a critic could point to the casting of Adam Driver a little bit, how like La La Land detractors talk about like the Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone presence in that movie, where it's like these aren't musical theater people. What are they doing here? I personally, I think that Adam Driver in Annette, like that element of casting kind of serves the character.
Can we talk about Adam Driver? Because I'm watching it this time. I think I was more critical of it than the first time I saw it. But you think it works? For this
Yeah,
character.
well, I think that because it's an awkward character on many levels. The timidness and the insecurity of that character, I think, is communicated effectively in vocal choices as well.
What do you guys think about Adam Driver?
That is a generous interpretation, I feel, of that, which is not bad. There's a physicality to his performance that I think is like very captivating. I think kind of works for
Yeah.
somebody that's very troubled. The music element is
Lacking.
tough for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to each their own. I feel like his performance overall for me lost some points because I do feel like even though these songs are going for something different and how they are delivering their messages, I feel like you kind of need something more than what he has to get some of that across.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think, to each their own. I can totally see both of these points. Coming from a musical theater background,
Yeah.
I love healthy supported vocals.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the choice that they made for this show. Obviously when they're in the opera proper,
Yeah, and they have a
they're
different
doing
vocalist.
a fantastic job. They're doing an excellent job. But a lot of the more conversational songs that occupy the remainder of the movie are kind of light and not really super supported, and
Definitely.
maybe you have a little vocal fry in there, and it's just kind of this thing. And if that's the tone of the movie that you want to be watching, then you've hit the nail right on the head. And if that's what they're going for, fantastic. Would I want to film a movie in that way? I would have a lot of trouble. But
Yeah, I agree. I think that Adam Driver sells the non-vocal parts of this really well.
I agree.
To the extent that I could not come up with somebody that I would cast instead of him. I think that there are plenty of people who would do the vocals a lot better, but I don't know that those people would be able to sell. I think he sells the comedy sets really effectively in a way that a better vocalist maybe would not have been able to do. And I think the physicality thing also is very helpful. Like the scene you were talking about earlier of him and the conductor. All I was thinking of is like the size disparity between these two actors, because Adam
Right,
Driver is like a
right.
gigantic person.
Yeah.
And he just towers over anybody he's next to, especially Simon Helberg. And I think that there's not a lot of other actors that you could get that across with.
Yeah.
And I think his best song vocally is the last song that he's in, because he's in a much lower register. And I actually think his voice shines a lot better when he's allowed to go into more of a bass register, whereas so much of this musical because it's not written for Adam Driver. It's written, I would assume, for Russell Mael, who typically sings much higher. I think Russell Mael is very much a tenor. He lives in that upper range. And if you kind of have to, shoehorn Adam Driver's vocals in there, like, I do think he's trying his best, but I don't know. These songs are clearly not written in a way that play to his strengths as a vocalist.
Because we're talking about Adam Driver, I'm reading a little bit on the Wikipedia about the casting of the movie, and Adam Driver was on board early, but that Leos Carax originally envisioned Joaquin Phoenix in the part.
Obviously, Joker comes out before this movie, but this movie was in production for so long that I feel like if Joaquin had been attached to this movie, maybe he wouldn't have made Joker. I feel like it's kind of going for too similar of a thing, or at least
the stand-up comedian.
Yeah, exactly.
Volatile.
Yeah,
maybe, and then eventually
the musical element and the sequel.
Yeah,
that should have been my comparison.
I have not actually seen these movies. It's just what I know of them. I think that Joaquin Phoenix would have given I think he would have shined in similar places and struggled in similar places to Adam Driver.
Exactly the same.
I think it would be a lateral move for this movie to have cast Joaquin Phoenix.
Fun fact about casting in this movie: Rihanna was supposed to be in this movie.
Yeah,
I read this and I'm like,
as Rihanna.
Oh wow.
Because I read that and I'm like, wait, as Anne or like as a different character?
As a completely different character that was all
named Rihanna as well.
She was going to be playing herself.
Okay,
she's good at that.
And in the latter half of the movie, once Annette is performing on this tour,
that's what I would have thought.
There
She's
was
like some mentor.
Well,
for
there was
Annette.
going to be
Baby
this.
Annette.
There was going to be this whole song that ended up being cut from the film, at least from what I've read, where Rihanna, as herself, is jealous of baby Annette because she's becoming so much more popular than
was
Rihanna.
Before
This is
Rihanna
kind of
played the
awesome.
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
We could have had that.
I know.
Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
I kind of want it now.
Yeah.
I do too. Also,
Absolutely.
Rihanna Sparks fan?
Maybe. I'm really
Maybe?
curious as to how she gets.
Yeah. How did she get involved
entangled
that
in
way?
this.
Yeah.
Well, also, like, while we're talking about, like, there being a Super Bowl reference and the aesthetics of this movie, that the baby Annette performance towards the end, that's a great moment of, like, maybe it's just due to very understandable budget limitations, but the stadium is clearly not full of actual people.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
bunch of
I
lights.
noticed that.
On top of all of these aesthetic elements, it's a movie that, like, I think what really stood out to me the second time watching it, even though it's dealing with obvious details, is that this is a film about performance on many levels. The film begins with a meta opening song. Sparks begin all their concerts with that song now. I've seen it happen 3 times.
Yeah, they've got an opening song for the rest of their career.
Yeah. But then when we look at, both of the main characters are performers. And we haven't, surprisingly, we haven't talked too much about our title character being played by a puppet.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten into that.
But so, like, this, we've talked a little bit about, transparent artifice in the film blending with its greater subject matter. But what thoughts do we have about the nature of performance in this film? And I think let's emphasize the puppet. It's high time we get there.
I mean, this is your area, Kelly. So what did you think of the puppetry?
Cracking his knuckles right now.
Yeah, baby.
Because
I'm
this is
getting ready.
a weird ass puppet. Also,
Yeah.
It
and
is.
stages in different stages.
It
as
is.
grows, yeah.
There was a number. I think it was like 9 bodies.
yeah,
a
as she
number.
grows.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. Obviously, one of the things that is asked anytime that a puppet is introduced in a work of art is why?
Yeah.
Why use a puppet instead of using an actor? What are you gaining from having a puppet in this role instead of using a live actor or using some other kind of artistic trick? And I was a little disappointed initially when I was looking online. There seemed to be a number of sources that quote the director as saying that he didn't want to use that many live kids and he didn't want to do a digital to have the Annette be a digital element. So I guess we'll use a puppet.
Yeah.
And
that
I'm
was
not
the
gonna
only option
lie,
that was left.
that hurt a little bit. I'm like, that's not.
That's not a good enough reason.
want
That's not
an
a positive reason.
intentional
That's not a
puppetry.
useful
Yeah.
reason. I think when you're looking at the film, there are kind of two ways that you can go, and one is that it is a metaphor for the exploitation that
that
Henry
was the one I
McHenry.
thought. Yeah.
That's a great tack, and I think that tack totally works. I think another tack that we can take is that both of these parents as performers are fighting with authenticity and originality, which I think are this film's two cardinal virtues: authenticity and originality. We get to see what happens when these virtues are dismissed, scoffed at, and pined for, but not achieved, which is, a huge bummer. But I think the other tack that we can take with this puppet is the parents are living inauthentic lives.
Yeah.
Not only performing for an audience, but performing for each other.
Yeah.
Not really being in conversation, not really being in quote unquote love.
We love
Right.
each other
Well,
so
we
much
love
if
each
we
other
say it
so
enough.
much. Yeah, exactly.
And so when this baby is born of this union, comes into this household, either they don't have any truth or authenticity to draw from themselves, or they don't have a good
Foundation,
mentor for that. They don't have anybody to emulate being themselves, being authentic, being original. And so that is why, when in the final scene of the movie, when the puppet is replaced by a live actor, it would signify to me, like, I'm leaving you behind. I'm coming into my own. Like, I have to be my own person.
Yeah.
Because I can't
Separate from you.
separate from you, because I can't count on you to be yourself.
Yeah.
So I have to learn how to be me on my own.
Yeah.
Which, I like that tack.
Yeah.
But I
think
wish
it's
that had been kind of anywhere in the research materials that I found.
Yeah. I kind of felt similarly good that by the end of the movie, the fact that you are seeing for the first time a live in the flesh girl is meant to be from the perspective of Henry. That now, the marionette of it all, he now no longer has any control over that. And so when he is now looking at her, it's no longer that. It's actually a human being. So, which I think is in line with a lot of what you just said as your second point there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I remember in the initial viewing of the movie that for all of the different considerations I was having from one scene to the next, that once it came to this conclusion and I see there's a live actor there instead of the puppet, that was my, that's it. That's the key to the movie moment.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit like when our past guest, friend of the podcast, Maggie Hill, described watching the end of Frances Ha. Suddenly it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that moment with this movie too. And, it's not quite a Pinocchio transformation, but the sense of transformation there, I think I finally understood what the puppet was about to begin with. And I think that first scene, when Annette is born, seeing it as a puppet there, I think my first thought was like, oh, this is what made the most practical sense. But then considering all the expressionism throughout the film, it also just made the most aesthetic sense too. I think the element of performance, going back to the greater Sparks body of work, it's a persistent theme for them too. The idea of reflexive takes on performance and expression sometimes of frustrations with that, or just insight about it, that's inherent to Sparks too. So I think for them to conceive of this story that's all about performance on this many levels just it makes sense with who they are. And with their themes and also an important entry in their discography that I think is very worth considering in relation to Annette is maybe the album of theirs that comes the closest to this movie by on a few levels, which is called The Seduction of Ingmar Bergman. It was released in 2009, as you can probably guess from its title. It didn't really get a production, but it's a narrative story set to music and all about this fictional situation in which Ingmar Bergman gets lured to Hollywood and kind of horrified by it.
Leos Carax had said in an interview that actually they had approached him about adapting that
Interesting.
initially, and he was like not interested.
Yeah, although I can see why they would have wanted him to work with that.
Yeah.
But that's, that definitely addresses some of the same themes. I read on the Wikipedia too that on the Sparks Wikipedia that they drew some inspiration for that story from their experience of not seeing their project with Tim Burton materialize. And so this is just a very familiar consideration for them too. And so then even when you get songs like So May We Start at the very beginning, that feels fitting for this story, but it just feels like something that naturally comes out of the collective genius of Ron and Russell Mael too.
Yeah, the performance part at the very beginning was a really fun little hook, and also a nice way for them to, I think, put their stamp on the movie. That they're performing, and that there's this passing of the baton of like, here we are musical storytellers. And now
we're bringing in our actors.
Exactly. We're bringing in our actors and
traveling together, sending them off.
Exactly.
And that Leos Carax is sitting at the console.
Booth. Exactly.
He's the first one to say, So May We Start.
Yeah.
Even before the song begins, that you can, if you're a Sparks fan, you pick up there are a few little melodies from their discography that the musicians are playing as they're just noodling before they actually come together.
That's nice. I like that.
There were two major visual motifs that kept coming back to me. One of the things that I noticed in the watching of the film is in very many scenes with Anne, she's often pictured with and or eating an apple.
I noticed that too.
Yeah, the Eve thing. Yeah.
That is what my partner said.
That was
way on the Eve train. I took a slightly different tack because it's such a surrealist piece.
Oh
yeah.
Magritte?
When I think of
Yeah.
apples and surrealists, I think of Magritte.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're referencing the painting The Son of Man by Rene Magritte.
Not the Ape of God. Sorry.
Not the Ape of God, but that is my second reference.
All right, cool.
So, whoa, we're getting there.
Yeah.
One of his quotes about this, a little chopped up to make it a little bit shorter, is everything we see hides another thing. This painting explores the conflict between the visible that is hidden and the visible that is present.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love this.
Yeah.
It's good.
I think part of the reason that Henry McHenry is so infatuated with and ultimately frustrated with Anne is because she had the glimmer of this originality and authenticity that she wouldn't show to anybody, that she wouldn't show to him, that she would only show either to herself or to some, people in the audience.
Right. Yeah.
But he couldn't access that. He didn't feel he had that within himself. He didn't feel she was willing to share that with him. And that's what he's, attracted to and infatuated with. So the madness of that constant conflict may have led him to murder. We'll see.
I like this.
And then the Ape of God, I was like, that's such a weird phrase.
You're like, that can't be original.
Why is that?
movie.
Why is that phrase there?
Yeah.
Well, there is a book called The Apes of God, Wyndham Lewis, 1930.
Okay.
Also kind of a very strange piece in and of itself. It's British commentary on the other contemporary artists of his day. But in it, quote, the apes of God that he meets are imitators of true creators. They are characterized as, quote, prosperous mountebanks who alternately imitate and mock at and traduce those figures that they at once admire and hate.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. I like this.
And
I mean, this fits Henry to a T.
To a T. Spot
Yeah.
on. So I was like, they must have known
this feels
reference.
like an intentional reference.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not a piece of media that I
Yeah.
understood or had any knowledge of going into it. So back to my point earlier is like, I started digging into like, well, why did they use that phrase?
Yeah.
Well, why
Right,
did they do that? And I'm like, oh, now I know more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, Ape of God too also is like it feels very in keeping with the provocative nature in which how he's trying to present as a comedian, pulling from this kind of idea of religion and then trying to like spit in the face of it by saying, he's some sort of de-evolutionized idea of, from this. So it's like meant to be provocative to call that. I love your surrealist take on this with the apple and everything. Really, really cool. But I also felt like with the Eve reference, like it felt like it, and it could be any and all these things.
And that's surrealism, baby.
There you go, exactly. But that that there was a little bit of that tied to it as well. That we're supposed to sort of look at them, Adam Driver, and Eve here a little bit. That there's something foundational about man and woman that they're meant to present, but also something like deeply flawed.
Yeah, and there's also like, she's taking a bite of the apple, like stepping into this like seedier like side of the world with him and like their relationship.
Yeah. And we've got to talk about Henry's very last line in the film too. I mean, the gesture at large is, that to me added to this whole theme of performance. Yeah. Which is that after Annette has been carried away, he's left in that room alone, and he looks up to the camera and says, "Stop watching me."
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you'd call it a piece, but there's almost as if there's like an understanding that dawns on Henry there, that his whole, like all of his performance career has been his attempt to address some kind of unresolved, to use a term that he uses, abyss within himself, to reckon with this abyss. And then he realizes that, it's led him to do these horrible things, and that in order to maybe find some kind of inner peace, he has to turn away from the stage and then to say to all these people, "Stop watching me."
Yeah, because I think that the line between who he was as a person and this persona that he's crafted has become so blurred that I think they've become one and the same. Whereas I think you can say like, oh, well, a lot of these kind of guys, these comedians that try to craft a persona, like a very provocative, like ape of God, that's not necessarily who they are outside, off stage, like in their normal lives. But I think for him, it actually has become who he is.
Yeah. I remember that being a moment. This was one of those movies where as soon as the credits rolled, I was like, oh, it's over. Tonally, it didn't feel maybe like a lot of endings do until it's the end.
Before we move on, I just wanted to make the last point that the puppeteers in this piece did an absolutely spectacular job.
Yeah.
They had to work with a lot of different styles of puppetry in one piece, which is, obviously very difficult, and moving around and being in practical sets below the actors. And that's a lot for them to do. But for them to have done that, not only with marionettes, but also with the Bunraku style and very briefly with shadow puppetry, all in this piece, was a huge accomplishment. So hats off to them. Very well done.
And the design of the puppets, it's so expressive. Like the boat scene, whenever you shoot back to Annette in like the bed, as she like can hear her parents fighting and the storm is, swelling around them. Like it's an incredibly expressive puppet.
Especially not to have lip sync.
Yeah, exactly.
None of those puppets lip sync.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite moment with the puppet in the whole movie, which is a definitive moment for the character of Annette, is after Henry has drowned the accompanist in that pool outside their house, which, side note, nice house.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Sad that such a thing should happen there.
Yeah.
But like after that happens, he comes up to the bedroom and realizes that Annette has been awake this whole time. And then she takes this lamp that has supposedly been inciting her singing capabilities and then smashes it to the ground. That to me, like, I mean, I'm sure it was powerful the first time, but on the second watch, I was just kind of like, oh, I really felt it there.
Yeah. I feel like we're calling out some of our favorite moments with the puppet. I want to call out one which is on the other side of that coin.
Yeah.
Her receiving the lamp, to me, was one of the most viscerally kind of sweet moments of the puppeteering. There's like excited movement with the legs. There's not much that you can do to change the face. It's like everything else.
Yeah.
That was the moment I want to call out.
I
Yeah.
totally
Grade A
agree.
puppeteering, yeah.
And Leos Carax won the Best Director award at the Cannes Film Festival that year. I imagine that directing a puppet is a big reason why. This movie, I mean, it didn't get any Oscar nominations, but it was pretty decorated at the César Awards, the French Oscars.
Mhm.
Yeah, in fact, it won. It was nominated for Best Film. It did not win, but Leos Carax won Best Director there as well. It also won Best Editing, understandable, Best Sound and Best Original Music, and Best Visual Effects. That's 5 César
That's pretty
Awards.
good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
So,
Yeah.
Good haul.
yeah, Ron and Russell may not have an Oscar, but they do have a César.
Yeah, we said before we started recording that So May We Start was shortlisted for Best Original Song this particular year, but did not actually get nominated. This was the year of No Time to Die.
Yeah.
The first Billie Eilish Oscar, right?
Yeah, first of 2, and probably
Yeah.
more to come.
Do you have any other puppet moments to call out?
The only one I was gonna call out specifically was that shot when she's learning to walk.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was such a spectacular shot.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite tell from just looking at the shot whether that was marionette or bunraku, but it was really spectacularly well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a really, I think, beautiful moment because that's right before the la la la. It's like just her and Anne, and you get kind of a glimpse of they could have like a pretty nice life if, Henry wasn't there to drag them down.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned the Sparks cameo yet. And I don't mean at the beginning or ending. I mean within the narrative.
The pilots.
Yes, they're the pilots of the private jet, that very tight private jet
Yeah.
Yeah.
that Annette is flying on once she becomes famous. Speaking of her becoming famous, I love the little montage of her appearing like on people's smartphones and also on like that Times Square screen. I enjoyed that. We haven't mentioned yet Henry's scar or birthmark.
Yeah, and the fact that it is like
Oh.
it grows
Continuing.
throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly at the end after the time jump, it's like takes up
Right.
the majority of the right side of his face.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's like if that's based on an existing symbol or anything like that. Wouldn't surprise me if it were, but I think for all the reasons you just described, Madeline, very effective tool of character building.
Yeah. I wanted to shout out something that was brought up a little before, the police interrogation scene.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
there's like something about it, partially because of where it's placed. It's like literally right after this really important moment where Anne has passed away, but that's some sort of apparition like version of her comes and says, I'm going to now seek revenge by now kind of living through our daughter type thing. It's heavy as shit. And then suddenly it's these 4 or 5 cops just going around a little bit and being like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and there was something about it that was on a very primal level, hilarious. And I just want to call that out. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the opera element. At the opera she's in at the beginning is not like a real opera because obviously like the song she's primarily doing in the opera at the beginning is an original song for this because it's also what Baby Annette sings later. But there's a montage kind of in the middle that's meant to symbolize like her star is rising, she's becoming really successful,
yeah.
and like
Yeah.
he's not. But you get like very quick, you see her in different like iconic opera roles. You see her in Carmen, you see her in Madame Butterfly,
Yeah.
you see her in La Boheme, and I'm like, oh, this has now like been a pretty broad time period for her to do all of these iconic roles. I really like that shout out to these other iconic roles that she would presumably perform.
We were talking about realism before. That's one way to place this story in a more realistic realm. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one visual shot that kind of came out of nowhere that I absolutely love. I don't know if it advanced the story. I don't know if it gave context. But it was the deflated flamingo
Yeah.
at the bottom of this drained pool and the salamander
Oh yeah.
yeah.
wriggling
Stirring.
around in
Yeah.
it.
Was that the salamander was CGI, right?
I don't know.
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I looked closely and I was like, I think that's CGI.
But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
loved the shot.
Yeah.
I just thought it was visually stunning.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And
on
I
that.
think it's like I think it does move the plot forward because it's like, well, now their pool and their home is
It's
abandoned.
abandoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you mean you get the contrast between like the very blunt realism of shots like that, and then the theatricality of the more expressionist moments of the movie. And so I think that, if you're trying to get to the why of those scenes coexisting, that scene exemplifies it perfectly.
Yeah. I wanted to shout out one moment that was like very engaging, was the moment where the accompanist was sharing his like internal thoughts.
That
Oh,
shot was
yeah.
awesome.
Was really, really cool. And I loved how much of the orchestra you could see.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also really liked the way that it depicted something that I think a lot of performers go through, which is you're demonstrating a very specific skill, but you also could be thinking about something else
Yeah.
as you're doing
Yeah.
it. And I really related to it, but I also thought it was like really cinematic and also
Totally.
like being context and setting up the next thing, but also being like so in the world of a musical. High marks for that. That was very
Yeah.
cool.
I enjoy
Yeah.
that a lot too, because I think that both of the conductors, like kind of big scenes, like that one and then also the one where he's introduced, where he's at the piano, they're shot in a very similar way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Where it's like this circling tracking shot that's all one
take.
all one take.
Yeah.
And yeah, the one that you're referring to is the one where I really was like, all right, his conducting is excellent here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a killer supporting performance from Simon Helberg, as we said before. On the topic of the music too, this is something that dawns on me more as a Sparks fan coming to the movie a few years after my initial viewing. But like the keyboard tone throughout, like Ron Mail, he has a very, like, if you listen to enough Sparks, there's a very particular way that his keyboard sounds, and then when you know that and can hear it in the soundtrack of the film, it just feels more like you can trace it being a work of theirs more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also occasionally hear, because Russell Mill has a very distinct like timbre to his
Mhm.
voice. And if you know what his voice sounds like, I think you can pick him up in some of the choral scenes.
Yeah.
Particularly the like tabloid scenes. You can hear him.
Definitely. I picked him up too, like in the backing vocals that played during the stand-up sets.
Yeah,
You can hear him there as well.
Do we want to move into Unlikely Shared Universe?
totally.
I'm here for it.
Game on.
Okay, fantastic.
All right. Well, we've just been talking about the accompanist a bit, and we never learned the name of Anne Defrano's accompanist, but we know that when Anne is out of the picture, he becomes the most caring, constructive presence in the young life of Annette. Let's say this accompanist comes from a family of the name Ginsler, and his conscientiousness towards Annette stems from principles passed down to him by his grandfather, a rabbi named Scott, who was based in suburban Minnesota. One of the tenets of Rabbi Ginsler's faith is that in moments when one feels they have lost touch with the divine, or in his words, Hashem, it is not that Hashem has gone away, but that we must remember how to see Hashem, and sometimes he can be visible in locations as banal as a parking lot. Rabbi Ginsler also teaches that in moments of adversity, we do not have to agree with or like the will of Hashem, but we can find peace and acceptance of his will, a philosophy which accompanist Ginsler may understand but cannot yet resign himself to in witnessing Henry McHenry's treatment of his young daughter. In any case, these tenets of Rabbi Ginsler's faith come into focus during a meeting in his junior rabbi days with a professor experiencing a reckoning in his marriage. And from that conversation, Rabbi Ginsler cements a few principles that he recognized in said professor, adhered to by himself, and then passed down through his familial and congregational progeny that can help one to be, in self-identifying as such, a serious man.
Serious man.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready.
Yeah, I was I was like, whoa, I'm serious, man.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, so Simon Helberg plays Rabbi Scott Ginsler in A Serious Man, the Coen brothers masterpiece from 2009.
Another excellent performance by him, I think.
Yeah. He's the right touch in that movie.
Yeah. A Serious Man, one of the quintessential Jewish American films. Yeah.
Excellent movie.
That's mine.
Yep. I can go next if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
It's already been intimated, so I'm going to jump in on this. When we get to the end of this movie, we find out that Annette, now a young girl, has vowed never to sing or perform again. It feels like a shot at her negligent dad, but really she's doing everything she can to break a generational curse because she is the fourth in a line of women to be born in her family that has passed down their arresting, impressive vocal talents, not just genetically, but also with some supernatural assistance. Because you see, Annette's great-grandmother was a French singer of great renown who passed away at a rather young age. It is believed that this great-grandmother gave birth to a daughter named Marcel, and that unfortunately Marcel died at the age of 2 from meningitis. But I'm going to say, for the sake of this unlikely shared universe, that she didn't. That instead of dying, she was quietly whisked away and raised by a different family. Perhaps also because there's a generational trait here that we'll see later in this bloodline, that maybe art comes before child rearing. On her deathbed, Marcel's mother telepathically bestows her daughter with vocal talents. And Marcel clocks this, but she has interests outside of the arts. So she waits and she decides to transmit this vocal prowess to her daughter, a young woman named Anne, who grows up to be a world-renowned soprano singer who will then, in an act of revenge on her baby daddy, decide to pass this voice along once more, this time a decision driven out of spite. That's the one.
Yep.
Livy and Rose.
Yes. I still haven't seen that movie, actually.
I haven't seen it since it first came out. It was a huge movie when it came out, and I remember it being fine. And I remember her being quite good, and I could see a world in which Marion Cotillard is also linked in some way with these films.
Yeah, where she plays Edith Piaf and won an Oscar for it.
Yes.
So you were mentioning the possibilities around our conductor friend, who's never named in this movie. And our poor communist friend, he meets a grisly fate at the hands of Henry McHenry. And all he wanted to do was conduct. Because you see, as Anne's accompanist, he was actually following in the footsteps of his grandfather Cosme, who was also a pianist. Unfortunately, the closest Cosme ever came to success was accompanying a friend of his at Carnegie Hall in a performance that received disastrous reviews in the New York Post. Desperate to hide these reviews from his aristocratic friend, referred to as the world's worst opera singer, he and her romantic partner buy up every copy of the New York Post in the city. He is not able to fully protect his friend, but she's still thankful enough to write him into her will. So he soon marries, has a family, and someday a grandson who carries on his musical legacy.
Florence Foster Jenkins.
There you go.
Oh,
Yeah.
Haven't seen it.
I actually haven't seen this movie either.
I actually kind of like it. Meryl Streep famously plays the lead character.
Yeah.
Really interesting Hugh Grant performance.
He's her lover, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like very charming, but he's also kind of a dick.
Yeah. Well, that's Hugh Grant. For
That's
you.
Hugh Grant for you. Yeah. But in a way that's distinct. Like I remember liking it. I thought it was good.
I was always kind of curious about it. You know,
Yeah.
Florence Foster Jenkins is obviously a real person, and I find her really fascinating.
Oh yeah. She's like a really fascinating person. Yeah.
So yeah, one of these days I'm going to get around to that. Maybe this will be my motivation to finally do that.
All right. Unlikely shared universe. Here we go. Henry McHenry is released from his imprisonment for 2 counts of homicide by drowning. His final meeting with and subsequent estrangement from Annette has broken his heart and inspired him to turn over a new leaf. Astounded by the remarkable technological improvements that have taken place during his imprisonment, he changes his name to Mills and begins a family. Unfortunately, his new daughter, Naveen, contracts a rare and expensive illness. With his comedy career in the trash and the ever-present sexual assault allegations looming, he needs to get as far away from the city as he can and raise a small fortune for Naveen's treatment. That can only mean one thing. You guessed it, space pilot.
Absolutely.
Henry Mills takes a 2-year contract piloting the transport ship Zoic as it ferries cryogenically frozen passengers to a distant planet. His journey is interrupted by a rogue asteroid field, crashing his ship into a nearby planet and killing all of the passengers. Save one, a young girl named Koa. They struggle to communicate through a language barrier, but Henry, Mills, has already lost one daughter. He'll be damned if he loses another.
Nice.
They struggle for survival on this alien planet, inhabited with ferocious beasts of all kinds that may look familiar to modern viewers. Their extraction is further complicated by an imminent asteroid impact.
More asteroids.
Will they escape this unknown planet and return to the world they know? Or will they become the stuff of prehistory?
Right. I didn't see this movie, but it's like it's a number.
65?
Yeah.
65.
I didn't see this either,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did see this movie in theaters, and I didn't like it.
That's why I didn't see it. It didn't look good, but it looked interesting.
It got kind of bad reviews, I remember.
I'm such a big fan of dinosaurs in general
Oh,
that
yeah,
I
of
wanted
course.
to like it.
Yeah.
And it
Couldn't
just,
get you
I
there.
just,
Yeah.
just
I think
didn't do it.
It's like an easy movie to sell. Like Adam Driver, he's a great action star. You know, he's coming off of Star Wars. He's good at the space stuff. Throw in some dinosaurs. Like, yeah, it seems like a fun time.
lose.
Seems like a slam dunk, and
Yeah.
it just missed the mark for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Great
Thank you,
job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But okay, so
Yeah.
we've talked about Annette. I think that I'm really glad to have discussed this movie, to have had this fan moment as a Sparks fan. Madeline and I have this shared fandom that I'm sure will continue to blossom in new ways.
Yeah, I had fun revisiting this. Thank you guys for actually watching this weird ass movie.
Oh,
We
yeah, of
really
course,
appreciate
of
it.
course.
Yeah.
I mean, I've said from our very first episode, like, I appreciate a big swing, and I think that is what this movie is going for. And I like what Shaun was saying about like simple stories told in unconventional ways.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that wraps
I was
this
gonna-
movie up really
I was
nicely.
going to say the exact same thing.
All right, you and
There we
I are on
go.
the same page here.
Well said about big swings too. I definitely agree.
Yeah. And you also said something in our very first conversation that I referenced when I talked about Comparison Corner, which is that you will see anything at least once.
Yeah.
And this is something that I also generally feel as well. I don't know if I'm going to see this movie again if I don't have a
okay.
good reason to, but I'm glad that I saw it. And I usually say that about most movies that we at least have a chance to talk about. But I really mean that. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of really interesting things in this movie. I feel like even just talking about it and throwing, our interpretations and feelings out about it has made me just appreciate the fact that art looks wildly different.
Yeah.
And that for it to only look a certain way would fly in the face of why we are creative.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
so may there always be movies like this and people to appreciate it.
Very nicely said.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you, Kelly, for
Yes.
joining us.
Kelly, thank you so
Thank you
much.
guys so
Yeah.
much for having me. This
is really
was
cool.
such a fun discussion. I super appreciate being on.
Yeah.
Totally. Do you have anything you want to plug?
I'm happy to plug my Instagram.
Do it.
Yeah.
At Kelly_A_Autry. I love singing and dancing and making cool stuff and
Yeah.
doing puppet stuff. So if you're in the market for any of that, please let me know. If you've got stuff in the pipeline that you're trying to get people to come and see, let me know about that too. I'm happy to be there.
I've seen your reels. You're very talented. This
That's
is
very
cool.
kind.
No,
I
it was
appreciate that.
cool. I was like, all right, man. Very
Yeah.
cool. So yes.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
It's certainly true.
Well, as we continue this cycle of offbeat musicals, if you know how we usually organize our episodes, we've done our suggestion box, and now it's time for our two shot, where we look at two films with striking similarities. I'm very excited for this episode that's coming up because we're going glam rock. And the first film that we are going to discuss for this Offbeat Musicals two shot is, this one's a long time coming for us because it's by a director who we have said on many occasions is one of our shared favorites, but haven't covered a movie of his in a little while. That director is Todd Haynes. The film is Velvet Goldmine. So you'll be hearing us talk about that. in 2 weeks alongside
Velvet Goldmine, we are also going to be covering Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which I am super excited about. John Cameron Mitchell directed and starred in this film. Came out in 2001. I am so excited for this particular pairing because I have not seen Velvet Goldmine.
And I haven't seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch yet.
And I haven't seen either one of these movies.
So we hope they pair well together.
I think we have every reason to believe that they will. But yeah, I am so ready for this.
In addition to this podcast, you can follow us on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can also contact us via email. We would love to hear from you. So write to us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. If you're on Letterboxd, you cannot follow me, but you can follow my co-hosts.
You can follow me, Madeline, at Patroness of Cats.
And me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold. And if you're listening to us for the first time, thank you so much for finding us. Or if this is the 7th or 8th or 85th time you've listened to us, thanks so much for sticking around. We've really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we would ask you, return listener, to please write us a positive review and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps. You can also keep it grassroots and tell a friend to tell a friend about the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast. That helps too.
Stop watching me.
Didn't want to say listening.
No, because I don't want to encourage our listeners to
Just
not
stop
listen.